He bought a lonely cabin. The mountain's daughter waited there with a secret promise Elias Rourke had spent most of his life moving. One contract ended, another began. One dusty town faded behind him, another rose ahead. Even in space, frontier places still smelled the same, metal heated by sun, dry wind, old fuel, and hard work. He was tired of borrowed beds and short promises. He wanted a door that was his, a roof that did not belong to a company, and silence that did not come with a price. That was how he ended up reading a listing on an outdated terminal in a station bar. Cabin for sale. Highland Ridge. Remote, cheap, no questions. No questions was usually the problem, but the price was real and the deed looked clean enough. The broker was a small man with bright eyes and a voice too smooth. "You sure you want that place?" the broker asked while the station's ventilation fans hummed overhead. "There are better cabins for a little more." "I don't want better," Elias said. "I want quiet." The broker tried to laugh it off. "Quiet is one thing, that mountain is another." Elias signed anyway. 2 days later, he landed on Cauldron's surface at a rough port cut into the foothills. The planet was old, rocky, and beautiful in a stubborn way. The sky was pale, like it had been washed too many times. The air tasted thin but clean. Most settlements stayed low, near rivers and flatter land, but the cabin was up in the ridges where fog clung to stone like a living thing. Elias unloaded his supplies, a crate of tools, a bedroll, solar cloth, and his most important companion, Juniper, his mechanical horse. Juniper was not a real horse, but she had the right shape, the right steady gait, and a brain that had saved Elias more than once. Her metal hide was scratched from years of travel, but her eyes glowed a calm amber. "Home," Elias told her and patted her neck plate. Juniper clicked softly, as if she understood the joke. The locals at the port watched as he started up the old mountain trail. Some shook their heads. A woman selling dried fruit called after him, not unkindly. "If you hear singing at night, don't answer," a miner nearby snorted. "If you see lights, turn back." Elias lifted a hand in thanks and kept going. He didn't believe in mountain stories. He believed in weather, in broken equipment, in bad people with good paperwork. Legends were something towns grew to explain their fear. The trail climbed through pine-like trees and patches of black stone that looked melted long ago. The ground was firm, but under it, he sometimes felt a faint vibration through his boots, like a deep engine far away. As afternoon faded, he reached a narrow shelf where the cabin sat alone, tucked against a cliff. It was smaller than he expected, built from dark blocks fitted together with strange precision. The roof was metal, patched with old repairs. A thin chimney leaned slightly, but it held. What made Elias pause was the door. It wasn't a standard frontier door. The frame had lines carved into it, smooth and shallow, almost like writing. When he touched it, the surface felt warmer than it should have been. Juniper shifted behind him, and her head turned to scan the tree line. Elias checked his sidearm out of habit, an old pulse revolver he carried more for peace of mind than for trouble. He opened the door. The cabin smelled of dry wood and stone dust. Dust lay in thin drifts on the floor, but the place wasn't wrecked. A table sat near the wall. A shelf held empty jars. The fireplace was cold but clean. He had expected signs of squatters or animals, but it was as if the cabin had been waiting, untouched. Elias set down his pack and walked through the rooms. One main space, a small storage nook, and a back room that could fit a bed. Simple. Enough. Not bad, he muttered. Juniper stepped inside with careful mechanical grace. Her hooves made soft taps on the stone floor. Her sensors swept the corners, and she gave a low warning click. "You're jumpy," Elias told her, though his own skin felt tight. He spent the next hour working. He laid out solar cloth in the last of the light, checked the water pump, and set a small heater unit near the fireplace. The cabin systems were older but still alive, as if someone had maintained them quietly over time. He found a small power box under the floorboard with a strange symbol on it, like a mountain with a star inside. When dusk came, fog rolled in from the valley, thick and slow. It pressed against the windows and made the world outside feel far away. Elias lit a lantern and cooked a simple meal, protein strips heated in a pan, a handful of dried vegetables, hot water turned into tea. Juniper stood near the door, still as a statue. The wind rose. It slid around the cabin and whistled through cracks in the rock like a flute. Elias sat at the table and listened. It was the kind of sound that could make a man think of voices if he let it. He did not let it. When he went to the back room to unroll his bed, something made him stop. There was a second set of footprints in the dust. They weren't his. They were smaller, lighter, barefoot. Elias froze. He glanced back toward the main room. The lantern light flickered once, then steadied. Juniper's head lifted and her eyes brightened. Elias drew his revolver and moved quietly, one step at a time. The main room looked the same. The table, the shelf, the fireplace. Then he saw her. A young woman sat on the floor near the fireplace, hands folded in her lap as if she had been there for hours. She wore a simple cloak the color of stone. Her hair was dark and slightly damp, as if she had walked through fog. She looked human at first glance, but her eyes were not. They were silver, reflecting the lantern light like moon on water. She did not move as Elias aimed his revolver, not aggressive, not friendly, just calm. Juniper gave a soft chirp that almost sounded curious. Elias kept his voice low and steady. "Who are you?" The woman blinked slowly. "Myra," she said. Her voice was gentle with a strange clarity, like words spoken inside a cave. "You came." Elias frowned. "I bought this cabin. I didn't invite anyone." "I know," Myra said. "That is why I waited." "Waited for what?" "For the owner," she replied. "For you." Elias tightened his grip. "How did you get in here?" Myra tilted her head slightly. "The cabin opens. It knows who belongs." "That's not an answer." "It is the only one," she said, still calm. "You can put your weapon down. I will not harm you." Elias didn't lower it. "People don't just appear in cabins, especially not in the mountains." Myra looked toward the window where fog blurred the world. "This mountain is old. It carries paths you cannot see." Elias felt a cold line creep up his spine. He had heard the locals talk, but he had not expected this. He took a careful step closer. "Are you from a settlement nearby?" "No." "Then from where?" Myra's silver eyes returned to him. "From here," she said softly and touched the stone beside her. Her fingers rested there like she was greeting a friend. Elias glanced at the fireplace. The stones around it were the same dark blocks as the cabin walls, but up close he noticed faint lines in them too, like the doorframe. Patterns. Circuit-like grooves worn smooth by time. Juniper made another quiet sound. Elias glanced at her, and for the first time he saw something unusual in her posture. She wasn't tense. She was attentive, like she recognized something. Elias lowered his revolver just a little, not fully. "Why are you here, Myra?" Myra took a slow breath, as if choosing words that could be carried safely. "Long ago," she said, "I made a promise. I would watch the threshold, I would keep balance, I would protect the one who took this place with honest hands." Elias scoffed lightly. "You're telling me you're some kind of guardian?" Myra did not look offended. "If that word helps you." Elias rubbed his jaw with his free hand. "And what is the threshold?" Myra's gaze shifted toward the floorboards. "Below," she said, "deep below." "The mountain holds something that should not be taken." Elias stared at her. "And you think I'm here to take it?" "No," Myra said. "I think others will come soon." The wind slammed against the cabin, making the window rattle. The lantern flame bent sideways. For a second, the carved lines on the doorframe seemed to glow faintly, so faint Elias wondered if his eyes were tired. Myra continued, quieter now. "People with machines, people who cut stone until it screams. They will not listen to warnings. They will not care who lives here." Elias' throat felt dry. He had seen corporate teams strip a land clean and leave nothing but dust. Cauldron had old mines, old rumors, a cheap cabin. It fit too neatly. "Who?" he asked. Myra's expression tightened, the first sign of worry. "A company," she said. "They wear bright patches and speak of rights and claims. They follow a signal the mountain never meant to send." Elias' mind moved fast. "How do you know they're coming?" Myra raised a hand, palm up. In her palm, a tiny mote of light formed like a floating ember. It hovered there without heat, spinning slowly. Elias' eyes widened despite himself. "The mountain tells me," Myra said. "It is restless." Juniper stepped closer to Myra, careful and quiet. Her sensors swept the floating light, and she made a soft, friendly chime as if greeting it. Elias watched his mechanical horse react, and his doubt shifted into something heavier. If Juniper's systems were reading something real, then Myra wasn't a trick of fog and fear. Elias finally lowered his revolver, though he did not holster it yet. "If you're telling the truth," he said, "then what do you want from me?" Myra looked up at him. In her silver eyes was something that felt almost human, loneliness held back by discipline. "I want you to stay," she said. "I want you to choose this place fully because the promise is not only mine." Elias frowned. "What does that mean?" Before Myra could answer, Juniper's head snapped toward the door. Her eyes flashed, and a warning tone rose in her chest. Elias turned. Through the fogged window, he saw faint lights moving along the lower ridge, cold white beams cutting through mist, not lanterns, drones, or vehicles. Myra stood quietly, cloak brushing the floor. Her voice was barely above the wind. "They're here," she said. Elias felt the cabin's strange warmth under his boots, like a heartbeat waking. He didn't know what the mountain was, or what Myra truly was, but he knew the look of people arriving with purpose in the dark. He checked the charge on his revolver and looked at Juniper. "Lock the door," he said. Juniper moved to comply, as if the cabin was already part of their team. Myra watched Elias with a calm that was not fearlessness, it was certainty, like she had been waiting for this moment longer than any human lifetime. Outside, the lights climbed closer through the fog. And inside the lonely cabin, Elias realized his quiet purchase had never been just a cabin at all. Night settled heavily over the mountain, wrapping the cabin in fog and silence. The lights Elias had seen below moved slowly upward, steady and deliberate. They were not wandering travelers. They were searching. Inside the cabin, the air felt warmer than before, almost protective. Juniper stood near the door, her systems humming quietly as she monitored movement outside. Elias checked the window again, careful to stay out of direct sight. "They're too organized to be random miners," he said quietly. Myra nodded. "They have followed the signal for many cycles. I hoped they would never reach this high." Elias turned toward her. "What signal?" Myra hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. "The mountain contains an old system. Long ago it protected worlds. Sometimes it sends pulses like a heartbeat. Most beings cannot detect it, but those who seek power learn to listen." Elias sighed softly. "So they think there's something valuable here." "There is," she said simply. Outside, a drone passed overhead, its white beam sliding across the trees like a blade of light. Elias moved away from the window. "How many?" he asked. "Many," Myra replied. "Machines and people." Elias holstered his revolver but kept his hand near it. His instincts told him this situation would not stay quiet for long. He had seen companies like this before, patient at first, polite even, but never willing to leave empty-handed. "All right," he said. "We need to decide what we're doing." Myra watched him carefully. "You speak as if you are already part of this." Elias shrugged slightly. "I bought the cabin. Guess that makes me part of the problem." For the first time, Myra smiled faintly. It was small but genuine, like a person remembering how to do it. "They will try to claim the land," she said. "They will say the cabin is temporary. They will promise safety and progress. And then they'll dig until something breaks," Elias added. "Yes." The wind outside picked up, pressing fog against the windows like waves against glass. Elias felt a strange pressure in the air, subtle but steady. He walked to the fireplace and crouched, running his hand over the stone. It felt warm again, almost alive. The carved lines faintly glowed beneath his fingertips. "What exactly is under this mountain?" he asked. Myra stepped closer. "A core, not a weapon, not a simple machine. It shapes environments, it protects balance. It was left here long before your people arrived. And you guard it." "I guide it," she corrected softly. "The system chooses protectors when the time comes." Elias let out a short breath. "And you think that's me?" "I do not think," she said. "I feel. The mountain recognizes you." He laughed quietly. "That's not something I ever expected to hear." Juniper emitted a soft tone, drawing their attention. A projection appeared in the air, a rough map built from her sensors. Several figures were moving slowly up the trail, carrying equipment. 2 drones hovered above them. "They're getting close," Elias said. Myra watched the projection carefully. "They will reach the clearing before dawn." Elias stood and stretched his shoulders. He felt the old tension returning, the kind he carried during long patrols in dangerous territories. He had tried to leave that life behind, but trouble always seemed to find him anyway. "All right," he said. "First thing is we don't let them catch us off guard." "You wish to confront them?" Myra asked. "Not yet. I want to see what they do first." He stepped outside carefully, keeping low. The fog swallowed sound, but the lights below flickered through it like distant stars. The air felt electric, making the hairs on his arms stand up. Myra followed silently, her steps barely touching the ground. Elias glanced at her. "You move like you don't weigh anything." "I weigh enough," she said calmly, "but the mountain helps me." They stood together, watching the lights for a moment. The night felt tense, as if waiting for something to happen. "Why wait for the owner?" Elias asked suddenly. Why not stop them yourself? Myra looked at him thoughtfully. Because the system values choice, it does not force protection, it invites it. That sounds complicated. It is, she said softly. Elias studied her expression. Beneath her calm, he sensed deep loneliness. She had waited here a long time. Maybe longer than he could imagine. You've been alone here, he said. Yes. For how long? Myra hesitated again. Long enough that time feels different. Elias nodded slowly. He understood that feeling more than he expected. Back inside, he began preparing the cabin. He reinforced the door, checked power levels, and set Juniper to monitor incoming signals. Myra watched him with quiet curiosity. You prepare like a soldier, she observed. Used to be, he said simply. What changed? I got tired, he answered after a moment. Tired of fighting things that never ended. Myra considered that. And yet you prepare again. Old habits, he said, though he knew that wasn't the full truth. Hours passed. The lights outside moved closer, stopping occasionally as the newcomers scanned the terrain. At one point, a drone hovered directly over the cabin, but then moved on, as if uncertain. Myra stood near the fireplace again, her hand resting on the stone. The glow beneath her fingers grew brighter. The mountain feels threatened, she said quietly. What does that mean for us? Elias asked. It may react. Before he could ask more, the ground trembled lightly. Not enough to knock anything over, but enough to make the walls hum softly. The lantern flickered. Outside, one of the distant lights jerked suddenly, then vanished. A faint shout echoed through the fog. Elias moved to the window. What happened? They touched a boundary, Myra said. The mountain warns before it harms. Elias watched carefully. The remaining lights pulled back slightly, regrouping. Whoever they were cautious. Good, he muttered. Maybe they'll rethink this. They will not, Myra said gently. They believe discovery justifies risk. Elias leaned against the wall, thinking. Then we need another plan. Myra turned toward him. What do you suggest? We talk first, he said. I'll meet them as the property owner, see what they want officially. Meanwhile, you stay hidden. I cannot remain hidden forever, she replied. Maybe not, he said, but surprises work better when they're actually surprises. Myra tilted her head, clearly amused by his logic. Morning crept slowly across the mountains, turning the fog pale gold. As light grew, the shapes of vehicles and figures appeared below the ridge armored suits, scanning equipment, sleek machines built for excavation. Elias felt a familiar heaviness in his chest. He had hoped for peace here. Instead, he found another conflict waiting for him. He stepped onto the porch, hands visible, posture relaxed but alert. The leading figure below stopped and lifted a scanner toward him. After a moment, a voice echoed through a speaker. Property registered to Elias Rourke, the voice said. We are representatives of Helios Extraction. We request permission to survey this area. Elias gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. Request noted, he called back. Permission not granted. A pause followed. The group shifted slightly. Our operations are legal under planetary charter, the voice replied. We have reason to believe valuable technology exists beneath this mountain. Elias folded his arms. Then you've come to the wrong place. Behind him, unseen, Myra stood quietly in the doorway. Her silver eyes watched the exchange with calm intensity. The mountain beneath them hummed softly like it was listening. And Elias understood one thing clearly. This cabin, this ridge, and the mysterious woman behind him were now tied to his future in ways he could no longer ignore. The fog thinned as morning grew brighter, but the air still felt tight, like the mountain was holding its breath. Elias stood on the porch with his boots planted wide and his hands relaxed at his sides. Below, the Helios extraction team waited in a neat line beside two low vehicles and several hovering drones. Their armor was clean and branded. Their tools looked expensive. Their speaker crackled again. Mr. Rourke, our charter allows resource assessment on unprotected land. This ridge falls under corporate survey zone. Elias kept his voice steady. This cabin is protected land. It's mine. A pause. Then the speaker's tone softened, almost friendly. We can compensate you for relocation. Very generous compensation. You'll never need to work again. Elias almost laughed. He had heard the same words on 3 different worlds from 3 different companies. It always started polite. I didn't come here to get rich, he called down. I came here to be left alone. The leader stepped forward, a tall figure with a visor that hid their eyes. They raised a hand, and the drones shifted positions like trained birds. We'll be respectful. the leader said through the speaker. "We only need access for scanning and a small drill test. If there's nothing, we leave." Myra stood in the doorway behind Elias, hidden by shadow. She did not step out, but Elias could feel her presence like a quiet warning at his back. Elias looked down the ridge trail. "No," the leader's shoulders tightened slightly. "You understand you're blocking lawful operations." Elias shrugged. "Then take it up with the nearest court. That's down the mountain." The leader tilted their head. "Courts take time. We are on schedule." Elias jaw set. "That's your problem." For a moment, nothing moved. Then one drone drifted closer, its beam sweeping toward the cabin. Juniper, standing just inside, released a sharp tone. The cabin's doorframe lines glowed faintly, like pale veins waking. The drone's light flickered, and it backed away as if it had touched invisible glass. The leader noticed. Their head turned slightly, focused now. "Interesting, our instruments show an energy anomaly here." Elias kept his face neutral. "Mountains do that." The leader's voice sharpened. "We'll conduct scans from a distance, then." Elias didn't answer, he just watched. The Helios team began setting up a scanning array below the ridge, careful to stay beyond the cabin's clearing. A thin tower rose from their equipment case, unfolding like a metal flower. Drones spread out and formed a loose circle around it, beams angled at the mountainside. Myra's voice came softly from behind Elias. "They will wake it." Elias glanced back without turning fully. "What happens if they do?" "The system will defend itself," she said, "and it does not always understand mercy." Elias' stomach tightened. "So we stop them." Myra stepped closer, still partly hidden. "Stopping them may require revealing what I am." Elias looked at her silver eyes. For the first time, he saw fear in them, not fear for herself, but fear of what might happen if she failed. "We'll do it smart," Elias said. "No panic. No rushing." He went inside and crouched beside Juniper. "Can you scramble their drone feed?" he asked. Juniper's eyes pulsed. A small hologram appeared, showing signal routes and frequencies. She was old-fashioned but clever. She could disrupt, confuse, and blind, even if she couldn't overpower a full corporate network. Juniper chimed once and the hologram marked a weak point. Elias nodded. "Do it when I signal." Myra watched him. "You plan like a protector." Elias stood. "I used to protect people who didn't deserve it. This time I'm protecting a place that might." Outside, the scanning tower gave a low hum. The air vibrated, and the carved lines on the cabin's stones brightened in response. The ground under Elias' boots warmed. Myra inhaled slowly. "It hears them." Elias stepped off the porch and began walking down the slope, hands visible. He wasn't charging. He wasn't hiding. He moved like a man with a right to be there. The Helios leader noticed and raised a hand. Two armored workers shifted toward him, but the leader held them back. "Mr. Rourke," the leader said, "you're approaching a restricted operation." Elias kept walking until he was near the boundary of their setup. He stopped with enough distance to be safe, but close enough to make his point. "You didn't hear me," Elias said. "You're not scanning my mountain." The leader's voice became colder. "It's not your mountain. You own a cabin and a small plot. This is planetary resource territory." Elias looked at the scanning tower. "That thing is waking something you don't understand." "We understand value," the leader replied. "Our readings suggest per-contact technology. That belongs to the charter." Elias' eyes narrowed. "Charters do mean much when a whole ridge collapses." The leader hesitated just enough to show doubt, then recovered. "We have safety measures." At that moment, the scanning hum rose sharply. The tower's lights turned from blue to white. The drones froze midair as if caught in a sudden pressure. Myra's voice whispered behind Elias, though she had not followed him far. "Now!" Elias lifted his hand slightly. Juniper's signal struck. Two drones blinked out for a second, then returned, drifting erratically. Their beams swept wildly, slicing fog, trees, rock. The scanning tower stuttered, struggling to lock onto the mountain. The Helios workers shouted and adjusted controls. The leader snapped commands, frustrated. "Restore alignment, lock frequency, don't let it slip." The moment of chaos was small, but it was enough. The ground trembled. A deep sound rolled up from under the mountain like a giant waking and exhaling. The air grew colder around the Helios equipment, while the air near the cabin remained warm. A line of fog split down the ridge as if pushed aside by something unseen. One of the workers took a step back. "Sir, the anomaly is rising." The leader's voice turned sharp. "Hold position." Elias took 2 steps back as the mountain responded. On the mountainside, faint lines began to glow, patterns in the rock itself. like a hidden map lighting up. Then the first guardian appeared. It rose from behind a boulder as if it had been part of the stone, unfolding into a tall shape with long limbs and a smooth head. It was not alive like an animal, but not fully machine either. Its surface looked like dark ceramic with glowing lines similar to the cabin's carvings. The Helios workers froze. The guardian turned slowly, and its gaze, if it had one, focused on the scanning tower. A second guardian emerged, then a third, forming a silent line between the mountain and the intruders. The leader tried to sound confident. Deploy drone defense, non-lethal deterrence. Drones moved forward, beams switching modes. They released pulses into the air, bright flashes meant to disrupt sensors, push targets back. The guardians did not flinch. One raised an arm, the pulses bent, curving away as if the air itself had changed shape. Elias felt his pulse quicken. This was far beyond a simple mining dispute. Myra stepped into view at last, walking down the ridge with calm purpose. The moment the guardians sensed her, they shifted slightly, not threatening her, almost acknowledging. The Helios team noticed her instantly. Identify, the leader demanded. Myra's voice carried clearly. Leave, she said. Your work here will harm this world. The leader's visor tilted. Who are you? Myra did not answer with a name. She lifted a hand and touched the air lightly, as if touching invisible threads. The glowing lines on the rock brightened. The guardians turned their attention fully to the Helios equipment. Elias spoke quickly, trying to keep things from becoming worse. Listen to her. Pack up and go. The leader's voice hardened. We're not leaving because a trespasser and a hermit threaten us with folklore. Elias' hands clenched. It's not folklore, look around. But the leader had already made their choice. They signaled their team. A heavy drilling unit rolled forward on tracks, its head lowering toward the rock like a metal tooth. Myra's silver eyes flashed with sudden intensity. No, the mountain answered her. A wave of force rippled through the ground. The drilling unit lifted slightly, then slammed back down, its tracks locking as if fused to stone. The scanning tower snapped in half like a dry branch. The drones dropped out of the sky, landing softly, not crashing, set down like toys by an unseen hand. The Helios workers stumbled, grabbing each other to stay upright. Fear finally broke through their training. The leader spoke again, voice unsteady for the first time. Stand down, we will withdraw. Elias breathed out, but Myra's gaze stayed fixed on the leader. You woke what should not be disturbed, she said, and you will return if you think you can. The leader swallowed. We'll file a report, this will escalate. Myra's tone softened slightly, but her words remained firm. Then the mountain will answer again. The guardians stepped forward in silence, not attacking, only advancing enough to make the message unmistakable. Helios extraction retreated. They worked fast, gathering what gear still functioned. Vehicles turned down the slope, leaving deep tracks in damp soil. The last drone lifted shakily and followed them like a wounded bird. Elias stood beside Myra as the lights disappeared into fog. For a long moment, the mountain remained tense. Then the glowing lines dimmed slowly, like a heart returning to a steady rhythm. Elias looked at Myra. You could have crushed them. Myra's shoulders relaxed. I did not want to. You saved them anyway. Myra's eyes lowered. I am learning, she said quietly, because of you. Elias didn't know what to say to that. The wind brushed past them, carrying the smell of wet stone and pine. He had wanted a cabin to hide in. Instead, he had found something that needed guarding. And the worst part was he wasn't sure Helios would accept defeat. He stared down the mountain trail where the company had vanished and felt the old soldier instinct settle back into his bones. They'll come back, he said. Myra nodded. Yes, Elias exhaled. Then we make sure next time they don't get that close. Part 4. The next 2 days were strangely quiet. Too quiet. Helios extraction did not return, but Elias knew better than to believe they had given up. Big companies didn't walk away from something valuable just because it scared them once. They changed tactics. They brought paperwork, reinforcements, specialists, and new plans. Elias and Myra prepared. Elias reinforced the cabin, upgraded the old sensor poles, and set Juniper to run constant sweeps. He marked paths through the fog and rock that only he and Juniper could navigate quickly. He also visited a nearby settlement down the ridge, keeping his story simple. Mining companies poking around, he told the locals. They might push too far, keep your families close. Most of the settlers believed him because they had seen corporate trouble before. A few didn't, but fear made them cautious anyway. Myra stayed near the mountain, placing her hands on stone and listening. She spent hours silent, as if hearing a language Elias couldn't. On the third night, the air changed. The fog moved faster. The cabin's carved lines glowed faintly without Myra touching them. Juniper gave a warning tone and projected a new map. Multiple vehicles were approaching, more than before. This time they weren't climbing the main trail. They were spreading out, trying to surround the ridge. Elias stared at the projection. They brought a full team. Myra's voice was quiet. They fear the Guardians now, so they will try to trick the mountain. How? They will seek the threshold from another angle, she said. They will dig where the mountain is weaker. Elias grabbed his coat and revolver. Then we move first. They traveled by night, Elias riding Juniper while Myra moved beside them like mist given shape. She never stumbled, never seemed tired. When Elias slipped on loose stone, the air near him seemed to steady, as if the mountain itself didn't want him to fall. They reached a narrow ravine on the far side of the ridge. Elias saw lights below, half hidden by rock. Helios equipment had already been set up, quiet drills, portable shields, and a tall antenna tower that pointed upward like a spear. "This is their new plan," Elias muttered. Myra's eyes tightened. "That tower is not a scanner. It is a signal key. It tries to speak to the core." Elias watched workers move like ants around the machines. The Helios leader was there too, along with a new group wearing different patches, specialists, maybe engineers, maybe legal agents. One of them held a tablet and pointed at the rock, giving orders. Elias crouched behind a boulder and thought fast. If Helios activated the core from this side, the mountain might react more violently. It might not limit itself to warning waves. The settlement below could be caught in it. He glanced at Myra. "Can you shut it down?" Myra hesitated. "I can, but it will cost." "Cost what?" She looked away. "The mountain will try to pull me back into it. I was shaped to serve. When danger grows, it calls me home." Elias felt a tight ache in his chest. "You mean you might disappear?" Myra's silver eyes met his. "Yes," Elias swallowed. He had known her only a short time, but she had filled the cabin's loneliness like a candle fills a dark room. The thought of losing her made him angry, at Helios, at fate, at the mountain itself. "We find another way," he said. Myra's voice stayed calm, but it softened. "Elias, you cannot bargain with what I am, only choose what you will do with it." Elias took a slow breath and looked back at the Helios camp. "Then we make their tower useless." He tapped Juniper's control panel. "Can you cut their uplink again? Bigger this time." Juniper's eyes pulsed and the hologram shifted. She highlighted the antenna tower as the main source, then marked multiple backup relays. Too many. Elias exhaled. "They learned." Myra stepped forward slightly. "I can weaken the signal if I touch the ground here, but you must act quickly." Elias nodded. "Do it." Myra placed her palm against the rock. The stone brightened under her hand and a low hum rolled through the ravine. Elias felt the air thicken like invisible water. Down below, the antenna tower flickered. A worker pointed, confused, and adjusted controls. Elias moved. He slid down a rocky slope with Juniper's careful steps, staying in shadow, using old habits from border patrol days. He reached the edge of the camp where equipment crates were stacked. The workers were focused on the tower. No one expected an outsider to come this close. Elias spotted the power unit feeding the antenna. It was locked, armored, and guarded by a drone perched above it. He pulled a small tool from his belt, a compact flare magnet used for emergency signals. He flicked it on and tossed it in the opposite direction, toward an empty ridge. The drone's sensors caught the heat signature and zipped away, beam focused on the decoy. Elias moved to the power unit and opened the side panel with practiced hands. He didn't destroy it. He didn't need chaos. He needed delay. He rerouted the power feed through a safety loop, forcing the unit into an automatic shutdown cycle. It would look like a system fault, not sabotage. The antenna tower blinked once, then dimmed. Down in the camp, the Helios leader shouted and workers rushed to the controls. A specialist slammed a fist on the console in frustration. Elias backed away, sliding into shadow again. He returned to Myra's position, heart pounding but controlled. "It'll stall them," he said, "maybe long enough to make them rethink." Myra's expression remained tense. "They will not rethink, they will force it." As if to prove her right, the Helios leader lifted a device and spoke into it sharply. A new machine rolled forward, a heavy unit with a reinforced core like they had brought a second heart. "They have backups," Elias muttered. The new unit connected directly to the antenna tower, bypassing the main power line. The tower brightened again, stronger than before. Myra's hand pressed harder into the stone. The glow beneath her palm spread outward like roots. The mountain rumbled. Elias felt it in his teeth. This wasn't a warning tremor. This was the start of something bigger. Down in the camp, the antenna emitted a clean, sharp pulse. The air shimmered. For an instant, the ravine looked doubled, like reality had a thin crack in it. Myra gasped softly. Elias grabbed her arm. Myra. Her skin was warm, but her hand trembled. "They are opening the threshold," she whispered. "If it opens wrong, it will pour out power without balance." Elias looked at the Helios camp, then at the distant lights of the settlement far below. He saw families there. Children. People who didn't deserve to be caught in this. He made his choice. "Do what you have to do," he said to Myra, "but I'm not letting you face it alone." Myra's eyes widened. "Elias, you cannot." "Yes, I can," he said. "Tell me how to help." Myra swallowed as if the words were heavy. "The Corps listens to will, not just commands. If you stand with me, it may accept you as anchor." "Then I'll be anchor," Elias said. "Tell it I'm here." Myra looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. She took his hand and placed it on the stone beside hers. The moment Elias touched the rock, heat surged under his palm, not burning but alive. Images flickered behind his eyes, mountains forming, rivers carving, storms controlled and guided. A sense of immense age, immense patience. He felt the Corps notice him, not like a person would, but like a world noticing a footstep. Myra's voice turned steady. "Now," she said, "think of protection, think of home." Elias did. He thought of the cabin's fire, of the quiet he wanted, of the settlers below, of Myra sitting by the fireplace, waiting not to trap him, but to offer him a choice. He thought of a frontier where strength meant restraint, not conquest. The mountain responded. A line of light rose from the ground, traveled along the ravine wall, and formed a glowing boundary between the Helios camp and the deeper rock. The antenna tower's pulse struck it and scattered like rain hitting a shield. The Helios workers stumbled back, shouting. The leader yelled into the comms. "Increase power, override." They did. The heavy unit whined, straining. The antenna tower flared brighter, trying to punch through. Elias felt pressure build under his palm, like holding back a flood. Myra's face tightened. "They will break their own machine," she warned. "Let it break," Elias said through clenched teeth. The tower emitted one last pulse, too strong, too sharp. Then the heavy unit sparked and shut down with a scream of metal. Silence fell. The glowing boundary remained for a moment longer, then faded slowly like the mountain exhaling. Down in the camp, equipment flickered. Drones dropped again, set gently to the ground. The Helios team stood frozen, stunned by failure they couldn't argue with. The leader took a shaky breath. Their voice came through the speaker again, not as confident now. "This is beyond standard operations," they said. "We will withdraw for now." Elias straightened slowly, hand still on the warm stone. "For now isn't good enough." The leader hesitated. "What do you want?" Elias looked at Myra. She was breathing hard, but she hadn't vanished. She still stood beside him, solid and present. Myra spoke first, voice clear and carrying. "Leave this planet," she said, "and do not return to this mountain. There are places in the galaxy that are not meant to be owned." The leader's visor dipped. "If we don't, you'll attack us." Myra's expression softened, but her eyes stayed firm. "The mountain will protect itself. I will not control how gently it does so again." That was the truth, and the leader heard it. Helios extraction began to pack up without another argument. This time there was no polite bargaining, no false smiles, only quiet urgency. Elias watched until their lights vanished into the night. When the ravine finally went still, Elias turned to Myra. "You said it might pull you back." Myra looked down at their joined hands on the stone, then slowly lifted her palm away. The glow dimmed. "It tried," she admitted. "But you stood with me. You changed the pattern." Elias breathed out, relief hitting him like a wave. "So what now?" Myra's silver eyes reflected the faint starlight. "Now the promise becomes shared," she said softly. "Not because you were forced, because you chose." Elias glanced up at the dark mountain ridge, then toward the cabin far above. He had come here looking for loneliness. Instead, he had found responsibility, connection, and a strange kind of home. He nodded once, steady and sure. "Then we keep it safe," he said. Myra's faint smile returned, small, real, and no longer lonely.